The morning sunlight spilled across the streets of New York like melted gold, warming the sidewalks that bustled with strangers chasing their busy lives. Among the crowd, a tall man in a crisp gray suit held the tiny hand of his daughter as they walked toward a quiet corner cafe. His name was Ethan Caldwell, and to the world he was a self-made millionaire, an investor, philanthropist, and visionary businessman whose face often graced the covers of financial magazines. But in this moment, he was just a father. His little girl, Sophie, barely 6 years old, swung her legs with the carefree innocence only childhood carries. Her small curls bounced as she skipped beside him, clutching her favorite teddy bear that had survived dozens of tea parties and bedtime stories. "Daddy," she said, looking up with eyes the color of a clear summer sky, "can we sit by the window this time? I want to watch the people walk by." Ethan smiled. "Of course, princess. The best seat in the house." To Ethan, mornings like this were priceless. Despite all the wealth he had amassed, it was Sophie's laughter, her curiosity, and the way she still believed the world was magical that reminded him of what really mattered. Today, he had promised himself he would leave his phone untouched, no calls, no deals, no distractions. Just breakfast with his daughter. They entered the cafe, greeted by the warm aroma of fresh coffee beans and the sweet scent of cinnamon pastries. The place was cozy, wooden tables, soft lighting, the hum of conversations blending with the hiss of the espresso machine. Ethan guided Sophie to a table by the window, just as she wished. As they sat down, Sophie pressed her hands against the glass, watching people hurry past, couples holding hands, a man juggling 2 coffees and his phone, a teenager walking a dog that seemed more excited than its owner. Ethan chuckled, finding joy simply in her wonder. A young waitress approached their table. She looked about 23, with chestnut hair tied neatly in a bun and warm brown eyes that carried a gentleness Ethan instantly noticed. She smiled as she handed the menus, but it wasn't the smile that caught Ethan off guard. It was what happened when Sophie, who had recently developed a fascination with learning simple gestures from a book on sign language, shyly signed, "Hello." The waitress froze for a second. Her eyes widened with recognition, and then her face lit up with a glow Ethan would never forget. With graceful hands, she signed back, "Hello, beautiful. How are you?" Sophie gasped, her little hands fumbling excitedly to respond. Ethan's heart stopped. He knew a bit of the language himself, enough to recognize what was happening, but it was Sophie's reaction that made his chest tighten. She looked as if she had just discovered magic. "You know sign language?" Sophie exclaimed out loud, her voice carrying the thrill of surprise. The young woman nodded, her eyes softening. "Yes, I do," she said gently, then continued in sign, "It's a beautiful way to talk." Ethan watched in silence, his throat tightening. He wasn't frozen by confusion, but by something deeper, memories he rarely let surface. Sophie's mother, Emily, had been deaf. She had taught Ethan and Sophie some signs before her illness took her life 2 years ago. Since then, Ethan had buried himself in work, convincing himself that building an empire would somehow secure Sophie's future. But watching his daughter now, communicating in the language her mother once used so beautifully, broke open something he thought had sealed forever. The waitress introduced herself as Lila. She patiently helped Sophie remember forgotten signs, laughing softly when Sophie made mistakes and encouraging her with gestures of praise. Ethan found himself staring, not just at their interaction, but at the joy radiating from Sophie's face. For the first time in a long time, he felt Emily's presence in the room. As they ordered pancakes, fruit, and coffee, Lila lingered a little longer at their table, drawn by Sophie's eagerness. Ethan noticed something else too. Her uniform was clean but faded, her shoes a little worn, and when she thought no one was looking, her eyes carried a shadow of exhaustion. Still, she served with kindness, moving table to table, pouring coffee, wiping counters, and every now and then exchanging signs with Sophie, who now seemed determined to order everything on the menu just so she could practice. "Daddy," Sophie whispered when Lila walked away, "she's nice. She's like mommy." Can we come here every day? The words pierced Ethan's chest. He swallowed hard and nodded. Minutes passed, and Ethan found his gaze following Lila as she worked tirelessly, offering a smile even when a customer was impatient, even when she clearly hadn't had a moment to rest. Something stirred within him. A mixture of admiration and sorrow. He wondered what her story was. Why had she learned sign language? The answer came unexpectedly. When the breakfast rush thinned, Lila returned to check on them. Sophie, with the blunt honesty of children, asked, "Why do you know sign language? Did someone teach you?" For a moment, Lila hesitated. Her eyes flickered, as if weighing how much to reveal. Then she pulled out a small chain from beneath her apron. At the end of it was a tiny silver locket. She opened it, revealing a picture of a smiling young boy. "My little brother," she said softly. "He was born deaf. He's 10 now. I promised him I would always be able to talk to him in his language. Our parents, well, they work long hours, and sometimes he feels invisible. So I learned for him. He's my best friend." Ethan felt his chest tighten again. Sophie reached across the table and gently touched the locket. "That's so sweet," she said, her voice almost a whisper. Lila smiled, but Ethan noticed the way her hands trembled slightly as she closed the locket. He saw the tiredness in her eyes again, the kind of weariness that comes from carrying more weight than the world knows. Something inside Ethan shifted. For years, he had poured his energy into investments, acquisitions, and expansion. He had written checks to charities, sponsored galas, and built schools in distant countries. Yet here, in this small cafe, a young woman was living out a story of quiet sacrifice and resilience. He realized that sometimes, the most profound acts of love weren't written in headlines, they were hidden in the worn shoes of a waitress working double shifts to care for her little brother. As the morning sun climbed higher, Ethan made a decision that would change not only Lila's life but his own.